All right, hello. This is Kenny Goldie, the author of the original The Do It Yourself Bailout and the Debt Reduction Made Easy book and video course. Thank you so much for however you found me. Maybe it was through the special report on the 5 devastating mistakes that people who are struggling with credit card debt can make that will keep them drowning in debt and suffering in pain forever. Or maybe you've already purchased one of my books or found me on a blog or on a podcast or somewhere else. And one way you wound up on my email list and got this video, the first of several, where I'm going to send you more videos to help you take the steps you need to start negotiating reductions in your debt directly with your bank or lender or credit card company, with the goal of getting you completely out of debt, 100% debt free as quickly as possible, as inexpensively as possible, so you can really start to enjoy your life, let go of all the painful emotions of debt, and really create a beautiful future for yourself and your family. That's what I want for everybody who comes across my material and reads my books and watches my videos. So thank you for being here with me. Today we're going to talk about the 6 ways that I see that there are to get out of debt. Somebody else might say, well, there's this or well, there's that, but these are the ones that I focus on. I really do believe that this is it. You may come up with another one and I may say, oh, I think it's just going to fall under one of my categories, as you'll see. I believe these are the 6 ways that there are to get out of debt. And I have 2 things to say about that before we start launching into what they are. One is the world, the zeitgeist, the financial world, advertising, people, parents, teachers, clergy, kind of the history of finance and debt for thousands of years wants people to believe that there is only one way to get out of debt, which is to pay it off in full. We are conditioned and programmed emotionally and psychologically to believe that that's the only acceptable way. And yet I talk a lot in my original book, The Do It Yourself Bailout, and throughout Debt Reduction Made Easy in the course, that there are many other acceptable ways. And if you can get past the emotionally, psychologically programmed way that wants you to believe that the only acceptable way is to pay it off in full at full interest for decades, and start to embrace that there are other legal viable ways that people who aren't just individuals, corporations and companies and governments use all the time. When you start to treat yourself as the CEO of the corporation of you, and your business right now is to get out of debt, and accept that there are ways to get out of debt that your competitor, the bank, uses often in its own business, then you start to open yourself up to a way to be out of debt quickly and inexpensively, much more so than the one way we're going to talk about, which is long-term payoff, the kind of generally accepted way. And then the second thing about that, once you kind of accept that there are multiple ways that are legally viable ways to get out of debt, I also want to stress that doing them all becomes a choice. That you either have to choose which one you want and then make a plan and pursue it, or I guarantee you one will choose for you. Sometimes it chooses for you just by default. You just keep making that payment every month, and guess what? Even though you didn't choose to, you are in long-term payoff. Or sometimes some other circumstance is going to come along and you're going to wind up being in another situation, like for instance bankruptcy. If you didn't make a plan and pursue it, people say, I wound up in bankruptcy. They didn't plan bankruptcy. It just happened because they didn't have a plan or choose another way. You have to choose one of these 6 ways if you want to take control of your debt and your finances. Because if you don't take control, if you continue to just react to finances and debt and do the things that are expected of you, one of these ways is going to choose for you. I recommend choosing and being in control, and the way to do that is to let go of any preconceived notions of right or wrong and just accept that there are other ways and you get to choose which one you want. So with that, we're going to go through them. The 6 ways to get out of debt. There's long-term payoff. There's the statute of limitations. Every state has a different one. We're going to talk about that in a second. There's bankruptcy, which we already mentioned. There's using a debt consolidator, which is different from debt consolidation, which is actually a form of long-term payoff, which we'll talk about. There's using a debt settlement, or sometimes it's called a debt relief agency. And then there's do-it-yourself debt settlement, which is the method that I use and the method that I teach in Debt Reduction Made Easy and in the Do-It-Yourself Bailout in my books and my video courses, and the one that we're going to finish off with today. For me to say to you, I believe it is the best, most viable, quickest, most inexpensive route towards debt freedom. So let's start at the beginning with long-term payoff. So long-term payoff is exactly what it sounds like. It is you pay on your credit card every month until your credit card is paid off. If you are making the minimum monthly payment, I'm going to be sending you a video tomorrow. Watch out for it tomorrow with a simple little financial overview spreadsheet that will allow you to put in what your current credit cards are, what their current balances are, what the current payment you're making is, what the current minimum payment you're making is, and show you where to find on your credit card statement how long it's going to take to pay off your balance at the minimum and how much it will cost total, including interest. And the example that you're going to see tomorrow is from a very low balance account, $3,000 at the minimum monthly payment. Want to guess how long it's going to take? 10 years? 15 years? 22 years to pay off a $3,000 balance, making the minimum monthly payment, and at the end is going to cost more than twice as much, almost 2.5 times as much in total payments, which is $3,000 in principal and about another $5,000 in interest on top of that. But that is long-term payoff, and it is your bank's goal at all times to keep you doing that. Your bank's business model at all times is to keep you on long-term payoff, to keep you making your monthly payment, either the minimum or another payment, forever until you've paid off the entire balance in full and all of the interest that accrues based on whatever payment you're making. If you're making more than the minimum monthly payment, you can pay your debt off sooner, much sooner sometimes. If you double the minimum monthly payment, you may pay it off 15 or more years sooner and pay a lot less in interest, but they still want you to pay off that full balance and all of the interest. And then there are many different forms of long-term payoff. If you follow Dave Ramsey, who I respect and admire, his books are great. He helps a lot of people. If you follow Suze Ormond or others, many present different methods of quote-unquote getting out of debt. But for the most part, they're all forms of long-term payoff. So one is pay more than the minimum monthly payment. You'll see in the mini spreadsheet that I'm going to send you soon that if you just pay double, instead of, I think it's $64 a month, pay $110 or $15 a month, and you'll pay it off in 3 years instead of 22 and spend $1,000 in interest instead of $5,000 in interest. But a lot of the time, when someone is struggling with credit card debt, when what I call your cash flow is upside down or in the negative, when you're making less money than you're spending every month, and a big portion of that is going towards your credit cards already, paying more than the minimum monthly payment is really tough. A lot of people just get in the habit of making that minimum monthly payment and paying all that interest without really adding up and seeing how much more they're paying than what they borrowed. So anytime you can double, triple that minimum monthly payment, that is one strategy of long-term payoff. Another is what I call do-it-yourself consolidation, which is going to be different from using a debt consolidator, which we'll get to in a moment. Do-it-yourself consolidation is what we call a jumbo loan. So you have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 credit cards, all with different balances on them, all at different interest rates. And you go and you find a bank that's willing to lend you the total amount. So say you have a $3,000 card, a $5,000 card, a $12,000 card, a something else $1,000 card. And some banks says, I'll loan you $40,000 at a combined lower interest rate than all of your other interest rates added up average out to, which will lower your monthly payment and lower the total interest that you'll be paying over time. So if you're paying an average monthly interest payment of all of your cards of, say, 26, and somebody will loan you the total amount at 16%, then you'll pay off your debt a little bit sooner and you'll save a lot of money in interest by doing that. But that's still a form of long-term payoff. Another is what they call the snowball method. Say you have multiple balances and one has a $2,000 balance and another a $6 and another a $10. And right now you're putting $50 a month towards the one and $100 a month towards the other and $200 a month towards another. The method would be pay the minimum monthly payment on the highest cards and put as much as you can from your income, the very maximum payment that you can afford to make, every cent of extra money you make every month toward that lowest balance card until it's paid off. and then keep making that same payment, but now roll it into the payment you're already making on the next balance card. So now you're making a lot more of a payment every month on the next balance card. And when that next lowest one is paid off, take all of that combined payment and put it into the next card so that you're snowballing the level of payment as you pay off lower cards, so that by the time you're paying off the higher card, you're putting a lot more than the minimum, maybe 5 or 10 times the amount if you've gotten used to paying that every month, so that you can pay off all of those cards. A good strategy. Also a form of long-term payoff. I think Dave Ramsey, don't quote me, has 29 or 30 or 31 different strategies, most of which are different forms of long-term payoff, but all geared towards making your payments, not going into arrears, paying the interest until your debt is covered. If that is the right choice for you, if your income and your debt and your finances, and in the Debt Reduction Made Easy method in the book and in the course, you get, when you buy the book, you get my full target spreadsheet, which allows you to calculate all of your income and debts and assets and liabilities and expenses and what you can put into your fund each month and how it adds up over time. If you find that your financial situation allows you to do a form of long-term payoff, and that's what you want to do, you don't want to go into arrears on your cards or settle for less than the amount owed, wonderful. I'm all for it. Do whatever works for you. Like I said, I want you to empower yourself and choose. This is a viable option if it works for your finances. Unfortunately, most people, by the time they find me and start reading the Do-It-Yourself Bailout and Debt Reduction Made Easy and taking my video courses and do coaching with me, are already in a position where that's not possible, or maybe they're already in arrears and they're having collection calls, or maybe they're still making their minimum monthly payments, but they're really struggling and they're not making enough money to put towards their life. Maybe they're falling behind on their electric bills. Do you know that last year in 2022, USA Today wrote this report? 1 in 6 American households, 20% of American households were behind on their utility payments. So if you're in a position where you're putting money towards credit cards instead of your light bill, or credit cards instead of food or gas or rent or clothes for your kids or school, if you're making those kind of choices, then long-term payoff may not be the best choice for you to succeed in your life, for you as the CEO of the corporation of you to succeed in your business of getting out of debt, in which case you'd want to look at another option. The next option that I do like to talk about, but let me say right up front, I do not recommend going for the statute of limitations. It is not something I teach. I recommend against it. This is the opposite of empowerment to me. Going for the statute of limitations is also what I call total avoidance. It's just not paying attention to your debt at all. I believe that just increases stress, increases collection calls, increases anxiety. It's very difficult to empower yourself around the emotions of debt when you're making a choice to just constantly run away from your debt. This is not the method I recommend at all. However, every state does have a statute of limitations on debt, maybe 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. You can check with your Secretary of State or a bankruptcy attorney in your state to ask them, what's the statute of limitations in my state? And if you choose to, you can just ignore your debt. Now, there are a lot of risks that come with that. You could likely get sued if you just don't talk to the bank at all, if you're not working with them at all, if you just disappear. The chances of them pursuing larger, more aggressive avenues with you increase, which means greater chances of being sued. There are people who get sued and just don't show up for court. They're just in total avoidance entirely, and their debt goes into resale. And when new debt collectors call and new debt collection agencies that have bought their debt call, they just ignore, avoid, trying to get to the statute of limitations until the debt can no longer be collected on legally. And the reason I say legally is that debt collectors often don't know that you've reached the statute of limitations. They don't buy your debt and then look up when it was originally issued and then check the statute of limitations and decide, well, I can't collect on this. They may just entirely not know and call you up still, even after the statute of limitations, and say, I'm collecting on this debt. Or they may know and not care, because there is a thing in the statute of limitations that says if you ever acknowledge your debt, if you ever say to somebody, yeah, I took out that card once, or yes, I owed that once, it starts the clock all over again. So a lot of debt collectors' goal will be to get you on the phone and pursue you to the point where they can get you to acknowledge the debt, and then the statute of limitations starts all over again, and now you've got 4, 5, 6 years again to avoid while new collection agents are coming at you and calling you and potentially suing you. I do not recommend it. It is the least empowering, if not disempowering method of getting out of debt. I like this image. You are just running from a boulder forever. And I believe, in my experience and working with thousands of readers and clients over the last 15 years since my debt settlement journey after the 2008 market crash, when my business partner died and I lost my business and I got left with a bunch of personal debt that I was looking at bankruptcy and wound up going through debt settlement. It's how I originally learned all of this. Statute of limitations, total avoidance, running for debt forever, not the one that I think succeeds. Next on the list is bankruptcy. We've all heard about bankruptcy. There are federal rules that govern bankruptcy. There are state guidelines that govern bankruptcy. If you are considering bankruptcy, I cannot say this strongly enough. Go visit a bankruptcy attorney. 100% absolutely get advice from a bankruptcy attorney. I am not a bankruptcy attorney. I do not claim to be a bankruptcy attorney. Whatever information I have about bankruptcy, I am just relating secondhand because it was told to me by my bankruptcy attorney, and I do not claim for it to be legally up to date or viable. I only mention it here because it is a legal way to get out of debt. When you think about the various options of getting out of debt beyond long-term payoff, just put into that framework the fact that bankruptcy does exist. That when credit cards started to be issued in the middle 20th century and people started to have trouble with credit card debt, the federal government recognized that banks were lending at a rate that people couldn't keep up with, that the tools and techniques of using credit cards hadn't really caught up with the practice of issuing them, that there were a lot of predatory lenders charging fees and interest and calculating things in ways that consumers didn't really understand, and people got into trouble with debt so often that the government actually said, we have to apply bankruptcy to credit cards. Prior to that, it had usually only been applied to businesses that couldn't function viably anymore. Now it was applying to individuals who got into so much personal debt that there needed to be protections for them, which tells you that as a country, as a government, people recognized that there needed to be other ways out of debt other than long-term payoff. Otherwise, people's lives would just be irrevocably ruined. So bankruptcy exists to protect the consumer from burdensome credit card debt. When you are in bankruptcy, it can feel, or when you're considering bankruptcy, it can feel overwhelming. I should also note that bankruptcy is a court proceeding. You probably know that. You pay a fee to file bankruptcy. Since the Credit Card Act of 2010 and the 2005 Bankruptcy Abuse and Protection Act that President George W. Bush signed into law, there are lots of limitations and restrictions around filing bankruptcy. There used to be a case where somebody could just file a bankruptcy under one of the different chapters and have all their debts wiped out completely. That doesn't exist anymore. Now, when you file personal bankruptcy, the court's going to try and guide you towards a repayment plan anyway, and you're not in control of it anymore. Your bank, the court kind of takes over. They take over your entire financial life. They look at all of your debts and all of your assets, and the court decides which assets are going to be used to pay off which debts. So you're still going to wind up paying on your debts, not in full if you don't have enough money to pay them off in full, but in a way that you are not in control of, you are not managing. When you file bankruptcy, you turn all of that over to the court, and the details of that, as I said, you must contact a bankruptcy attorney to discuss. So please do that. But that is another option. It is a legal option. It does exist for you in order to reduce or eliminate credit card debt when it becomes too burdensome to handle through long-term payoff. The next one I'm going to talk about is using a debt consolidator. Now again, this is different from debt consolidation where you take out a jumbo loan and at a lower interest rate as a form of long-term payoff. Using a debt consolidator means you go to a business who has this particular business model. They are not a lender. They do not loan you money. What they do is they take over the payment of your debt so that you're going to pay 100% of the principal of your debt to them. So if you owe $25,000 in credit card debt to a bank, you're going to pay the debt consolidator $25,000, but you're not going to pay them interest because they're not a bank and they're not a lender. They can't charge you interest. When you've paid them the $25,000, they are going to then go to your bank and negotiate a reduction in the debt amount to your bank, say 50%. So they will pay your bank $12,500 to close your account. They will keep the $25,000 that you sent to them. They make $12,500 profit for negotiating the 50% settlement amount with your bank. You save all of the interest that you would have paid that bank, and you're out of debt much sooner. They usually structure plans. They don't intend for you to pay them the whole $25,000 up front, but when you pay them the $25,000 on a monthly rate, that's often even less than you're paying to your bank monthly, but with no interest. When you're paying 100% principal every month, you can see that you can get out of debt much more quickly. I'm making up numbers. If you're paying $500 a month to them, $25,000 can be paid off in, about 2 years. 6,000, 4 years. 4 years. So that would take 20 years to pay off to the bank and cost you $50,000. You're going to pay it off to them in 4 years and only spend $12,500, but they're going to make the profit for settling your account with the bank anyway, which is good for them. That's a good advantage for them to make that profit off you for doing the negotiating with you. When I get into do-it-yourself debt settlement, I'm going to talk about why do you need them? Why do you need somebody else to go to your bank and negotiate a settlement and keep half of the money when you could go directly to your bank, probably settle for less than the 50% that they're going to take to just take your money and move on, settle for maybe 35%, save more money by doing it yourself. We're going to get into do-it-yourself debt settlement, which is obviously the form that I recommend. But I do want to say that there are companies out there that will do it for you called debt consolidators who are not lenders, who will take your full principal, settle with the bank at half, save you all of the interest, and you'll get out of debt much sooner. And then there is using a debt settlement agency. Now, a debt settlement agency is not paying off your debt for you the way the debt consolidator does and making a profit margin on you paying them the total amount of your debt. A debt settlement agency will go to your bank and negotiate a settlement on your behalf. They're not paying any money to the bank ever. The way debt settlement agency works is when they say to you, if you have a $25,000 debt and they say, we think we can settle this with the bank for 50%, you're going to start sending us a payment every month for them to build a fund for you. So again, not that it would probably be this high, but I'm going to say $500 a month. You send $500 a month to the agency. You're not paying them. They're just storing that money for you. And when it builds up to $12,500, they're going to call the bank and negotiate a 50% settlement on your behalf, and then take a 10, 20, I wrote there, even sometimes 25% commission on the total debt settled as their fee. So really, they're not going to start calling the bank when you've sent them $12,500. If their fee is 20% of $25,000, $5,000, they're not going to start calling the bank until you've sent them $17,500. Then they're going to call the bank, negotiate a 50% settlement, pay the bank the $12,500 in settlement, and keep $5,000 for themselves as a commission. They're going to tell you that you need them. They're going to tell you that they have a relationship with the bank. They do this every day. They know the ins and outs. They get favors, that they're the company who has to do this for you. When you listen to their radio commercials, they talk about how there are special programs that can help you get out of debt sooner. If you qualify, call us and we'll let you know all of this language to make you think you need them to go settle your debt with the bank for you. You don't. I'm here to tell you, after me doing it with 6 major U.S. banks on 8 accounts and having thousands of people read the Do-It-Yourself Bailout and hundreds of other readers and clients, that you do not need a middleman to go negotiate on your behalf. In fact, banks often prefer negotiating directly with their borrower. And when you do, again, you will save more money because not only will you settle for likely less than the 50%, it's a market range that they'll settle at because they want to move on quickly. When you can spend more time than them negotiating, you can get down to 40%, 35%, maybe 30%. You'll not only save more money, but you won't pay them their 20% fee. So let's say that same $25,000 debt that's going to cost you $12,000 to the bank and $5,000 to the agency, you're going to wind up saving $7,500. If you were to settle it for yourself at 35%, which is about $8,500 with no fee, you've now saved $17,500 instead of $7,500, calling your banking and negotiating on your own instead of using an agency. All of that is what I call reputable debt settlement agencies. There's one key factor to be aware of. A reputable debt settlement agency doesn't take their fee until after they successfully negotiate a settlement for you. And when the deal closes, they take their fee. There are also fraudulent debt settlement agencies out there who front load their fees, meaning as you start paying them the $500 a month and their fee is $5,000, your first 10 payments go to them. They take their fee first. And then you start building towards the $12,500 fund or whatever level it is for whatever amount of debt you have, which means at any time, say you reach $8,000, $9,000 and you decide, I don't want to do this, I'm not into debt settlement, I can't keep making the payments. Whatever you've paid them at that level comes back to you. They can't keep the money that they're storing for you for a settlement, but if they're front loading their fees, they will keep their fee without ever having made a phone call on your behalf. In many states, if not everywhere, this is illegal, but that doesn't stop people from performing the scam. So be aware, if you are going to use a debt settlement agency or a debt relief agency, do not sign with anyone who says their fees go to them first. Only sign with somebody who says they don't get paid until they make the settlement for you and make the final payment. I talk a lot more about fraudulent debt settlement agencies and what to look out for and how to avoid them in the Debt Reduction Made Easy book and course, which I hope you'll check out. And lastly, that brings us to do-it-yourself debt settlement, my preferred way, the way that I went through the process, and very successfully enough that I wrote a book and started a whole business and career helping people do it for themselves. This is what I actually went through. After the 2007 subprime mortgage crisis and the 2008 crash, when my business partner died and our business went under, I was left with over $250,000 in credit card debt. Over the course of a couple of years, I settled for $92,000, about 37%. I know that sounds like a lot of money, and it is. Of course, I had a very high debt amount, but imagine if I hadn't settled, if I'd kept on long-term payoff, this other number, $159,000, which is what I saved in principal, I would have paid to them. I would have paid them the whole $254,000 and probably another $250,000 in interest. And it would have taken me 20 years. It's been 15 years since I did this. I would still be in debt. 15 years later, I would still be paying off this debt. I'd probably still have $100,000 left that I needed to keep paying off. I was paying $4,000 a month. I don't even know how. I know my finances over the last 15 years. I would never have been able to keep paying $4,000 a month in interest, month after month, year after year for these 15 years until I would have paid them $400,000, $500,000 and still be in debt 15 years later with 20 years total to pay it off. I don't know what my life would have been like. I have 3 children. I don't know how I would have raised my children. I don't know where I would have lived if I had continued doing that. The best, only, quickest, and thank heavens I chose it route for me was debt settlement. I scrimped and scrounged and saved and sacrificed to pay off that $92,000 over a couple of years, but when I was done. I was 100% debt-free. This was with major U.S. banks. I was 100% debt-free, settled out, gone, and able to then put all of my income over the next 15 years towards my life and my children's lives and our future. That is how much I believe in this route. I wrote books and created courses about it so I could come to you and say, if this is the situation you are in, whether it's at this level or $25,000 or $30,000, whatever level it is for you. If it's gotten to the point where the situation of your world has changed. Look, when COVID happened, a lot of people were living lives that worked financially. They were making an income, they were paying their bills, they were servicing whatever debt they had at work, and then you're suddenly out of work for 2 years. Everybody's stuck at home and we're on unemployment for a third or a quarter of our normal income. And then COVID passes and we go back to work and interest rates spike, and your home loan that used to cost you $2,500 a month is now costing you $5,000 a month, only in extra interest because the interest rate has gone up on your variable rate mortgage or your credit cards. The interest rates have gone up 6 or 8 or 10% in the last year, and you're putting more money towards that. And suddenly what was a positive cash flow financial situation that worked is now not working, and you're upside down and you're struggling whatever level it's at. I believe do-it-yourself debt negotiation is the quickest, least expensive, most empowering route. You're not turning your financial life over to the court. You're not running away from it. You're not turning it over to an agency or a consolidator who you're calling all the time saying, what's going on? What's going on? Where are we? Where are we? You're on the phone with your bank. You are taking control. You are making it happen. In the Debt Reduction Made Easy book and video courses and all of my personal coaching, everything I do is about giving you knowledge and information so that you build courage and confidence. I give you every skill you need to get on the phone with your bank and feel strong and empowered and knowledgeable to do these negotiations on your own and save yourself a ton of money. I showed you this card. With an agency, if you have a $50,000 debt, you're looking at settling at about 50%. That's what the agency is going to negotiate because they want to move on as quickly as possible and can get that in maybe 3 to 6 months, which is $25,000 that you're going to pay to the bank, plus 10 or 20%, maybe 25% in commission to the agency, which means you're spending $30,000 to $35,000 to settle that $50,000 debt and only saving $15,000 to $20,000. With do-it-yourself debt reduction, where you call up your bank and negotiate on your own, you could get that 50% settlement rate easily down to 40%, 35%, sometimes even 30% of the total balance. That's not the amount you get off. That's 35% of the total balance, which is more like $17,000 that you're paying to the bank. And no fees, there's no agency fees. So you're spending $17,000 and saving $33,000 instead of spending $35,000 and saving $15,000. You're literally saving twice as much by doing it directly with your bank. You don't need the agency to do it for you unless you want to pay somebody $17,000 for the convenience of having them do all the negotiations. I, of course, throughout the Debt Reduction Made Easy and Do-It-Yourself Bailout method, think that you will feel far more empowered, get over the painful emotions of debt so much more quickly, and feel more in control of your finances doing it yourself, in addition to saving twice as much money. Those are the 6 ways to get out of debt in Debt Reduction Made Easy. In the course, I also take you through these criteria. Through each method of getting out of debt, I examine each one on how long does it take, how much will it cost in principal, interest, commissions, or fees, how much personal time and effort will you have to put in, how will you feel about yourself during and after the process. I talk a lot throughout the book and the course about the emotions of debt and how to alleviate those emotions to empower yourself to get yourself out of debt by taking control of your finances. I talk about the effect on your credit score, on all of these things, and how to use your credit score as a tool to help you get out of debt and save even more money. And I talk about how much control you have. I just mentioned control for a moment. There isn't time in this video to go through all of those, but they're all in Debt Reduction Made Easy in the video course and in the book. So please go to debtreductionmadeeasy.com, pick up the book. With it, there's a free in-depth spreadsheet. I'm sending you a little mini spreadsheet tomorrow that you're going to love, but when you pick up the book, it's like a multi-column spreadsheet for all of your debts and assets and income and expenses and building your settlement fund over time. It's really awesome. There's a workbook you can pick up with like 80 pages of pre-printed worksheets to take you through the Debt Reduction Made Easy method, and there's the option to get the video course at a big discount, just my way of saying thank you for picking up the book at the time that you do. Look for my video coming in a couple of days with the financial overview spreadsheet so you can start examining what your credit cards are really adding up to, and figuring out your target amount. And then a couple days later, you're going to get one on looking at the goals and obstacles that you have and setting, real time specific targets for when you're going to get out of debt, what obstacles could come in your way, and how to overcome those as they do. After that, you're going to get some sample settlement agreements in a video. You're going to get a sample script to actually get on the phone and talk through debt negotiations with the collection agent. That's all coming in videos over the next several days. Thank you so much for finding me and signing up for my email list. I look forward to doing everything I can to help you become debt-free as quickly and inexpensively as possible. And you can always get more at debtreductionmadeeasy.com. Have a great day.